Tracing. It's one of the most sacrilegious things an artist can do. Next to doing AI or making an NFT. Do people even still talk about NFTs? Anyway, it's one of those things that's like written in stone that if an artist does this, it's grounds to be cancelled. And yes, while I do agree tracing and showing that piece as if it's something that you did is definitely a bad thing, I do also believe that tracing is something that can really help a whole lot of artists out there. What you see me doing right now is tracing with an illustration done by the legend himself, JC Leyendecker. I absolutely love the ways he renders the face, and the overall proportions are just very ideal. Now, once I finish tracing this image, I guess the question that should be asked is, what has that accomplished? One can make the claim that you technically did turn your brain off when you do trace, and that you don't really know why Leyendecker even did the strokes that he did, or why he put that line over there, or why he made that brush stroke over there. And yes, while that is true to an extent, I do also think that there's some merit to tracing. Again, for those that are watching this video, just let it be known that I absolutely do not condone tracing and then proceeding to market the image as your own creation. That is a bad thing, and I don't like when people do that. How I view tracing is like this. Tracing in a way is sort of like when a teacher is writing something on the chalkboard and you just go ahead and proceed to write what they wrote because it might be vital notes. And the crazy thing is for the students that just mindlessly copied from the chalkboard or the textbook, while they may not get the greatest grades, they do somehow pass and skirt barely making it. And the reason behind that is because when you are copying down notes, you are also retaining the information you wrote down. It's why the people that type up notes aren't really good at retaining the information in class in a general sense. Tracing is sort of the same way. Yes, you are technically mindlessly copying what's beneath that sheet of paper, but at the same time, your hand is familiarizing itself with the thing you're tracing. I could bet that a person that has traced 1,000 hands will get somewhat skilled in drawing hands. To an extent, tracing is not the end all be all, but in this next segment, I'll show you guys how to trace mindfully and with purpose. To demonstrate this tracing process, the first thing that I want you guys to get is an anatomy book. Anyone is fine as long as it has more or less proportional figures and diagrams that you can trace. These are some examples of reputable art anatomy books, but I'm going to go with the Anatomy for Sculptures because I do personally own that book. That, and I think it's a really damn good book for learning anatomy. I got some images from the book that I feel are pretty good to trace, so I'll start with the first level when it comes to the people that are just starting out to mindlessly trace. One, I'll say try not to mindlessly trace. Trace with the intention of trying to get better. That is the first and foremost thing that I want to tell you guys. But as you're tracing, you're going to go over the figure, going over the planes of the body, all the curves, and you may even trace some of the hard cast shadows. And it will look a bit lifeless and sloppy, but remember, we're tracing to learn. Again, it's like taking notes. Just because you take some notes from a textbook doesn't mean you can publish your own textbook with the same exact material, right? You're probably not going to be as informed as the original author. But if you copied every single word from that textbook, I can bet that you would have retained some knowledge of what you've wrote. It's not going to be as deep and extensive as the original, but again, this isn't the end-all be-all. It's only the beginning. And I'll also say it's mainly for beginners as well. If you're good at art, then what are you doing here? Okay, now here's what level 2 of tracing looks like. You start to trace the things beneath to get a deeper understanding of what you're tracing. Again, Anatomy for Sculptures has these diagrams and images that show the different muscle groups, which is so useful when it comes to learning muscle anatomy. I can't recommend this book enough. If you were tracing faces, I would then say to trace some skulls just to get a slight understanding about the structure and forms underneath all that skin. But for the sake of this video, I'll just be focusing on the male torso and a little bit of the arms. When tracing the underlying muscle groups, you'll start to familiarize with how the chest connects to the delts and how the delts sort of wrap around and then connect to the bicep and triceps. And again, to sing more praises about this book, it has diagrams of how these muscles look in different angles and different positions, like if the arm were raised or if the arm was at its side. Because in those cases, the muscles will probably flex and therefore take on a different shape. So you want to get a bit comfortable with how these muscles are positioned, and I have been tracing for a long time, so don't expect to get comfortable from just a few examples. You are more than likely going to have to do a bunch of models, figures, diagrams of muscle structures until you can get comfortable with heading to level 3 of tracing. Let's just go ahead and find a picture of a torso, and we're not going to exactly be tracing the figure per se, but rather tracing the muscles underneath the figure. And that's where you'll really start to see tangible results. By tracing all those muscle structures from before, it's like we're trying to chart a blank map with waypoints and landmarks. Soon you'll be like, okay, this is where the pecs are, and this is where they connect to the delts. And from what you've been tracing extensively, you'll then be like, okay, this is how the delts curve when the arms are raised. And before you know it, you'll realize you aren't really tracing anymore. You're no longer just writing notes from the chalkboard or just the textbook. You've gone from note-taking or tracing to actually studying, because now you're training your eye and your hand to look for those things you've traced countless times. And before you know it, you're already drawing the torso without any reference. Why? Because the muscle memory is there, no pun intended. And by trying to essentially trace the underlying muscle structures from the photos, you've actually began to, well, study it. And here's a sort of bonus level. You can use a 3D model app, and the app that I'm using is Magic Poser. And I know, it's not the most anatomically correct thing out there, but again, we're all doing this trying to chart out a map known as the anatomical structures on this blank canvas, so to speak. And since it is 3D, you can position the figure any which way you want, and you could try drawing the muscle anatomy in all sorts of different angles. And oh yeah, remember that piece I traced of JC Leyendecker? If I tried finding the underlying face structures and tried to really study up on his illustrations, well, that would essentially be what is called a master study. You know that thing artists do, dissecting a really skillful artist that they like, analyzing their style, making notes, while at the same time trying to replicate the piece that this master artist done? Yeah, that's more or less, I guess, the same thing. You're not exactly tracing or copying. Well, you are copying. Well, it's more accurate to say you're studying. Anyway, I hope you guys watching can see the virtues of tracing, or at least see the initial merits of tracing. I do think that once you pass the, beginner tracing phase, you'll just end up studying the tried and true way an artist traditionally studies, which is with a whole bunch of reference and drawing from those references. I hope that, the title didn't trigger anyone. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of art content in the future, and believe it or not, I am using TikTok. Yeah, I know. Who even am I? Anyway, all my social media links are in the description below. So if you like the video, please, like the video and subscribe. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.